everybody. Welcome to the Scudbuster Diaries, Flagler County Storm Chasers. My name is Ed Sharkovich. Today on Storm Log 3, we're in the studios for Flagler County Television. We're going to be talking about 3 weather events that affected Flagler County in recent history: Hurricane Irma, the Nor'easter, and the King Tides. Hurricane Irma drove everybody crazy for the better part of a week. If you remember, the storm forecasted path changed. East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, and it wound up coming up the middle of the state, affecting everybody. With Hurricane Matthew, it was a coastal erosion event, and I think that's what a lot of us were expecting with Hurricane Irma, but the big surprise was that it came up the intracoastal waterway and flooding was apparent. These first sets of shots come from the top of the 100 bridge looking north, and when we first came in right after the storm passed by, the flooding was very heartbreaking. People walking around in nearly waist deep water. You could take a look at some of the water lines that were on people's houses and really realize that there were so many lives that had changed with this storm. On the south side of 100, the story was the same. Here we are, we're looking over towards Friends Cafe, the Flagler Beach Police Department, the Flagler Beach Mobile Home Park, and then down off of 9th Avenue South and South Flagler Avenue all the way down to South 23rd Street. Take a look at the water line on that house, and everybody that I spoke with basically had the same story, that right about 3:30 in the morning, water started coming in and it didn't stop. Many houses on South Flagler actually had water to depths of 19 inches or more. Staggering. The west side of the Intracoastal Waterway also had its share of problems. If you take a look at Lambert on the left-hand column and Palm on the right-hand column, look at some of those water level heights. Really shocking and staggering to know that a lot of people that chose not to evacuate had to endure this in the dark with no power. We did have storm surge that affected the northern part of the county. These are some shots of Ocean Shore Villas up by Ocean Avenue in the Hammock. And while there were areas where the surge from the Atlantic Ocean did indeed breach the sand dunes, it was not as severe as it was with Hurricane Matthew. Flooding also took place in the western part of the county. Remember that up here in the upper left-hand corner of this map is the St. Johns River. St. Johns River has a tributary called Dunn's Creek. Dunn's Creek connects to Crescent Lake. Crescent Lake connects to Bull Creek and Dead Lake, and this whole area here is tidal. So as tides came up with the storm and as inundating rainwater fell down, it had nowhere to go. The Mondax, Daytona North, those western parts of Flagler County areas around Haw Creek started to overspill their banks. This area here outlined in red, known as the Haw Creek Basin, also had storm surge water from Hurricane Irma. Bull Creek was completely surrounded by water, a lot of water inside the restaurant there. And of course, the Haw Creek tributaries, like we had said, most all of them overflowed their banks. This bottom picture right here shows a residence where the edge of the creek right here was a quarter mile away from where it normally sits and came to within 20 or 30 feet of the house that sits off to the right. Pretty amazing and shocking. Erosion was something that did take place along A1A. Here we can see some dune washouts down near South 15th Street and Varn Park. Just like with Hurricane Matthew, we did have a breach immediately south of the parking lot and a washover. You can see where it came through in this top picture with debris. There's a propane tank and some other things that actually crossed A1A. And here we are on the east side of A1A now, looking over towards the west. You can see the path of sand that the water took when it broke through. Painters Hill was very hard hit with Hurricane Matthew, and it was again hard hit with Hurricane Irma. Here we see an irrigation pipe that's hanging in the middle of nowhere, a lot of walkovers and people's decks. You can look at this bottom right-hand picture here where the turf from their yard is now almost at beach level. Wind damage. Wind damage was something that we would expect. The highest wind gust in Flagler County was 83 miles an hour. This is right around North 20th Street. We've got some pictures from South 12th Street, some signs down, damage to the Bank of America building. This was pretty pronounced throughout Flagler County. The big hit happened at the Flagler Beach Library, where the majority of its roof was compromised. Taking a look through the front doors, you can see light coming in through the ceiling where light should not be. Surfside Estates was very hard hit during Hurricane Matthew. Hurricane Irma, the same thing. They endured quite a bit of wind damage in addition to storm surge damage from the Intracoastal Waterway. You can see it right here back behind this manufactured home. With Hurricane Matthew, the inundating storm surge came in 8 lots deep. With Hurricane Irma, it came in 10 lots deep, and a lot of the homes that were near the Intracoastal Waterway did in fact have quite a bit of salt water in them. Other things that happened with wind damage that are unique to Flagler County was an EF1 tornado that came in right around 8:16 p.m. If you take a look at the radar, the red box here is the tornado warned area, and the southern extent of it goes from Sunbelt Chemicals up to 206 in St. Johns County. Right here, out over the water, this white circle is the center of tornadic activity. This white line heading towards the east with hash marks on it is the path of the tornado. National Weather Service did a storm damage assessment following it, and they determined that the tornado that went through was an EF1 tornado with winds of approximately 86 to 110 miles an hour. Pretty strong. I went and investigated the damage path, and it started right at the field just north of the entrance to Washington Oaks Garden State Park Beach. There were 11 telephone poles that were all listing at a 20-degree angle. If you take a look at where they went into the ground, you can see how it just looks like somebody came in and pushed them over. Across the street, right at Old A1A, the first 3 properties had twisted tree trunks, scattered debris in different directions, very, very classic patterns of a tornado going through. That damage continued on to Rollins and Kathleen, and then we know for a fact that the tornado crossed over the Intracoastal Waterway, went through Princess Place Preserve. The National Weather Service saw that damage path from a helicopter, and then crossed over into the Agricultural Museum. All of these twisted trees that occurred here in Ag Museum property happened immediately to the southwest of the horse barn. If you're familiar with that property there, the barn did not sustain any damage. There weren't any animals that were injured. While the tornado was occurring, there was another phenomenon that took place in Flagler County called a rear flank downdraft. This diagram here shows a very large tornadic supercell, similar to the one that came in with Hurricane Irma. And basically what happens when clouds reach a certain height, the entire thing starts to twist and rotate, and you'll start to get tornadic winds forming in the middle part of the storm. That's what these red arrows here. At the bottom is where the tornado itself took place. And the rear flanking downdraft, or an RFD, is represented by this purple line circling around into the blue. And basically what it is a very large mass of air and wind that comes straight towards the ground and then spreads out. And we know that this happened just to the north of the tornado path damage by Washington Oaks, because when we go into the River to Sea Preserve, you can see the damage that took place to the picnic pavilion. Half of the pavilion was completely collapsed flat to the ground, and the other part of it was twisted off of its foundation. You can take a look at these anchoring points right here by as much as 40 degrees. Straight line winds going straight to the ground and then spreading out laterally, twisting the building off its foundation. RFD, or rear flank downdraft. Let's talk about the nor'easter. The nor'easter was the rain that would not go away. We already had quite a bit of rain from Hurricane Irma, and then here it comes again. This is an initial rain prediction image from the National Weather Service. You can see where the center of the storm was and where the estimated rainfall amounts were. A couple of days later, we had the same exact thing. The rain was constant. The winds were coming in from the northeast. If you can take a look over to the right-hand side, all of these little lines coming in over Flagler County, where the green circle is right here, represent the direction of the nor'easter. Coastal flood advisories, high surf advisories, wind advisories, rip current statements, flood watches, hazardous weather outlooks were all given by the National Weather Service, and rainfall estimates were in inches per day, not just half inches and small amounts, but inches per day. This area of red and orange is over Flagler County. And when we took a look at the radar for the better course of a week, you could see how much red and orange that we had, which indicates heavy rainfall amounts. At the beaches up by North 20th Street, the wind was very strong, very heavy, continued coastal erosion. Some of that erosion took place again out by Malacompa Road. You can see how high the tide was here. The water was undermining the pavement, very significant. And then in inland parts of Flagler County, we had water everywhere. Water that had not completely drained from Hurricane Irma was now added to and piled upon by things from the nor'easter. This is the L section. We've got parts of the hammock that again experienced rainwater flooding this time. Down by Malacompa Road, same thing. All of this is classified by the National Weather Service as nuisance flooding. Nuisance flooding. Doesn't necessarily come inside of homes, but just makes life uncomfortable and makes travel on roadways frustrating. The nor'easter winds also brought a considerable amount of debris on our local beaches. This is here at Varn Park. You can see the amount of particulate plastics that came up on the beach. Pretty staggering. Also at Varn Park, I found a bottle from Cuba. Still had the cork in it with some substance inside. When I uncorked it, it smelled like old beer and pineapple. Looking at the bottom of the bottle, it was from Cuba, and after speaking to some people who are from Cuba, they said, well, what you just described is Cuban rum. The bottle was from 1959 after we took a look at the serial number. Not sure how it got there in one piece. The big story on South 9th Street was this propane tank that washed up on the beach straight out of the Keys. The Keys Propane Company came from somewhere down south as Irma worked its way through. Let's talk a little bit about king tides now. A king tide is an abnormally high tide. In normal circumstances, you've got the moon that pulls on the earth. King tides happen when both the moon and the sun pull at the same time, rising water levels beyond where they normally are. Back in the 1950s, our water levels were lower, and this type of phenomena did not have as much of an effect as it does on us now. Back in 2010, we first started seeing king tides taking place in certain areas like Miami Beach, and now we have it affecting us here in Flagler County. Water that had fallen from Irma and water that had come in from the nor'easter, along with water runoff from both of those storms, was now coming back towards us because of the pull of the moon and the sun. Parts of Flagler County that had experienced flooding from those two storms was now having to deal with it all over again. This time it was more of a nuisance flooding than it actually coming inside of people's homes. This was the scene down at South Flagler Avenue and South 23rd Street, water covering the roads, making travel difficult. Down by South 23rd Street and South Flagler Avenue, we had similar stories, and seeing people's belongings out by the sides of the road with water coming back in, very disheartening for everybody. South 26th Street and South Daytona and Annette Street, again, Intracoastal Waterway starting to inundate Flagler County roads again. This was not just an east-sided Intracoastal Waterway event. Over on the west side of the Intracoastal Waterway in Bulow Plantation, we also had similar things happening. Some residents in there took to sandbagging the sides of the road to prevent water from coming in through some of these saltwater, marshy, swampy types of areas. Flagler County was not the only county to be affected by the king tides. St. Johns County and the Loop down in Volusia County, some roads were also under water. So here we are. We are in the beginning of November, and this is what our hurricane season has looked like as of September 30th. We still have some time to go. The end of the month is when hurricane season ends, so it's very important to still have a plan and to still have common sense and to follow advice of emergency management in case we are faced with another significant storm. Make sure you know what your flood zone is. This is a map. This can be found at flagleremergency.org. And if emergency activation orders are given from both emergency management and the National Weather Service, what they're saying is that there's a great likelihood of loss of life. Nobody wants to leave their home. Nobody wants to have to go and travel for hours to try and find someplace safe to stay. But if they tell you that your area is under a mandatory evacuation, it's because they are worried about your welfare. Just think about those beginning pictures of the flooding in Flagler Beach and out by Hawk Creek. You don't want that happening at 3:30 in the morning and then realizing that you've made a mistake by staying. With any type of floodwater situation, if you don't know how deep it is, don't go into it. One of the great messages from the National Weather Service is turn around, don't drown. And I can speak personally up in the B section during the nor'easter at the end of Barrington. There were cars that did indeed get flooded out because the water was 3 feet deep, and that's enough to shut down an engine, damage your vehicle, and you never know what erosion is happening beneath the water surface. It's not worth risking your life over. Talking about tornadoes, the F1 tornado that went through Flagler County, it's important to know the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. With a tornado watch, you need to be prepared. You need to pay attention to forecasts, monitor sky conditions, and have a plan for taking shelter. If a tornado warning goes into effect, that means that a tornado is imminent for your area. It's on the ground and it's coming your way. Take shelter immediately. Always have a plan. Know where your shelter is. Know what part of your home you're going to go to. Schools, hospitals, and office buildings. Stay away from windows. Try and find the sturdiest part of a building off the second floor, on the ground floor. And if you're in your car, don't think that that is a safe place either. Read through this. Make sure you follow the warnings and the advice. And there's an important reason for that because Flagler County had the EF1 tornado right across our border. St. Johns County had an EF2 tornado. EF2 wind speeds are between 111 and 135 miles per hour. This one came in right at 12:19 p.m. Take a look at the red box. The red box actually covers part of Flagler County. Washington Oaks is on the southern edge of it. On the top of it, edge of it is Smokin' D's Barbecue up by State Route 206. Out over the water here is the center of tornadic circulation, and that tornado followed this hash-marked line going west. What's the difference between the damage path of an EF1 and an EF2 tornado? Well, this tornado crossed right through the Summer House condominium complex, and take a look. The damage is devastating. Devastating. The outside walls of the top floor of this condominium complex and multiple buildings have been totally collapsed. The interior walls totally collapsed. Half the roof of both of these buildings are missing. And if you take a look in the background here, you can see people's possessions, lives, and belongings scattered everywhere. Fortunately, there were only minor injuries. Nobody was killed. But the point is that when a tornado warning is given, it is best and wise to find a safe place because you don't know how big it's going to be. Traveling up there, I took a look at the damage path that this thing made, and I found sections of roof that were large and an entire acre of trees that were covered in insulation up to a half-mile away. Very, very strong, powerful storm. Make sure you heed warnings when they do come through. So, consider this. These are things that I heard from people as I was traveling around taking pictures for emergency management that were given to FEMA. The first story comes out of Marineland Acres, just south of Washington Oaks Garden State Park. Back during Hurricane Matthew, there was a resident that took Gorilla Tape, which is a very, very strong type of duct tape, and he taped all the outside seams on his home and on his street. When the storm surge came through, his house was the only dry house on the block. For Hurricane Irma, him and 5 of his neighbors followed suit, and they were the only houses on their street that did not have storm surge water go inside. May this be a good idea for you for your hurricane preparedness kit and action plan? Absolutely, but with a warning. While this may keep water from out of your house, I would not think that it's safe to stay and tape yourself in. Sometimes with storm surge, there are electrical short circuits, and you don't want to be stuck taped inside your home with a fire. But if you're going to be evacuating, this may be something to think about, to tape every possible way up that water can come in, and it could make a difference in saving your home from damage. Sandbags. Sandbags were given out during Flagler County's preparation for the storm. Sandbags are designed to keep water out, but not for a really extended period of time. So think about doing this. Go to one of your home improvement stores, buy a pack of this plastic drop cloth, spread it out on the ground, put your sandbags on top, flip the edges over, and that may help to prevent water from coming in for a longer period of time. Third thing, roof straps. I saw this top picture on an 18-wheeler truck driver page, and this truck driver took the load-carrying straps off of his 18-wheeler, strapped his roof down to the ground. Sounds like a great idea. I don't know what the end of the story was here. I've spoken to several people, some of whom said that it's an awesome idea. Other people said that the angle that these things are anchored out is not practical, and it may actually cause these straps to break. But it caused me to do some research, and what I found is that there are actually companies out there that make roof harnessing systems where there are entire webs of these straps that will go over the roofs of manufactured homes and anchor straight down into the cement, giving your roof added stability. If you take a look at the red arrows, these are all the attachment points for these straps to the ground. So my advice is to research it. Take a look at testimonials, price it out, and this may in fact make a difference for folks that live in places like Surfside Estates over in Bulow Plantation for the next storm that could take place in Flagler County. Animal wisdom. These are things that I found to be amazing to me, and I'm continuing to tell these stories. The first one comes off of John Anderson Road. There was a woman who owns a horse ranch, and she said that 2 days before Hurricane Irma hit, the horses in her pasture started digging holes, and the holes were the size of their body and allowed them to lie completely flat, just below ground level. Apparently, this is a defense mechanism that horses use to protect themselves. This was 2 days before the storm hit. Bottom left-hand picture, the ghost crab. Friend of mine, Scott Spradley, down off of South 23rd Street, told me that 6 hours before the storm waters of the surge on the Intercoastal Waterway happened with Hurricane Irma, hundreds of these little crabs started coming onto his property and climbing up the screen enclosure of his patio. The crabs all stayed approximately 5 to 6 feet above ground level, and as all of this storm surge came into the southern part of Flagler Beach, his home was one of the few that did not have any water come into it. Somehow the crabs knew. Similar story over on Lambert Avenue. A friend of mine said that 6 hours before the storm surge started to come over the banks of the Intercoastal and into his home, all of these little green gecko guys started climbing up the side of his home, lying on the window ledges and window sills. So this sounds like a story that my grandparents or great-grandparents would have told, but I think it goes something like this. When the horses start digging holes in the ground and the crabs and the lizards are climbing, it's time to get out. Big advice for all of us right now. We've been through a lot. It's been a month and a half full of storms. A lot of us are stressed out. We've lost our homes, we've lost our possessions, and we all handle stress differently. It's not just residents, it's emergency services, first responders, government officials. A lot of these people have been trying to handle the mechanics of an emergency like this while they have lost their own personal belongings. The point of this cartoon is that each of us goes through the same stress differently. We all have different mechanisms of reaction. We all have different tolerance levels. Be patient. Be patient with everybody around us, and maybe when it comes to be our turn to start to lose it, people will be patient with us. There's another group of people that I want to talk about that made a big difference for all of us, and these are the volunteers and the employees of our local government and agencies that helped us to get through this. I'm talking about people in water management that helped to make sure that some of our spillways were not clogged, people at the Emergency Operations Center, government officials, law enforcement, fire department, volunteers that manned the shelters, people that made meals, our Chamber of Commerce, Flagler County Assist React, that had a huge part in supporting emergency operations. People that restored power, the ones that rehung our traffic lights. The road crews that started to build our dunes back up again to get us the rest of the way through season. The National Guard that came in to make sure that everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing and behaving themselves. People that cleaned up the beaches, the American Red Cross and churches that donated and brought meals in, and the volunteers that selflessly went into the neighborhoods that were affected by this flooding and helped day after day after day by ripping out carpeting and drywall and helping people carry their lost memories to their curbs. I want to say thank you. If there's a silver lining to the things that we've had to go through this year, it's the fact that our community is now stronger, and that is extremely important. The Scudbuster Diaries job is to go out into severe weather and document the things happen. We talk about the weather that was, and we can't be everywhere at once. So we're asking for your help. If you experience severe weather, wind damage, flooding, hail, lightning strikes, or if you see tornadoes, water spouts, or significant beach erosion, get in touch with us. We'll come out to you with our cameras and video equipment, record what has happened, give you copies for your records, and then we're going to take that data and information and give it to Skywarn, which is part of the National Weather Service. We're also going to give it to the Flagler County Emergency Services so that they can take the information and have responses that will benefit us in the future. Our job at the Scudbuster Diaries is to go out into what we call the gap. Flagler County is unique, and we've got a little bit of a radar problem. Northeast Florida receives its Doppler radar information from two installations. One is in Jacksonville, the other one is down in Melbourne. Because of the distance between the two towers and the angle that those radar beams come out at, they cross and intersect over us between 5,000 and 10,000 feet above ground level. Everything from the ground up to those two altitudes is in a blind spot. We cannot be seen on Doppler radar. Those two altitudes are perfect heights for severe weather to come in, literally under the radar, undetected. Our job as volunteers is to go out into severe weather, following storms, chasing storms, and intercepting storms, and then recording and documenting what takes place to alert emergency management and National Weather Service officials so that they can send out information and bulletins and warnings to all of you. I want to take this moment to thank Flagler County Emergency Services. You can go to their website at flaglercounty.org/emergency. Take a look on there. They've got all kinds of great information. For the very best in non-hype weather forecasting, stick with Flagler Weather Info on Facebook. It's run by the Flagler County Emergency Operations Center. And if you ever want to find out what's happening for forecasts for Flagler County, follow Bob Pickering at the Flagler County Emergency Operations Center. He does a twice weekly broadcast, more frequently if we're going to have severe weather, called Flagler Weather Update. You can find that both on Flagler Weather Info, on the Flagler County Emergency Services website, and on the county YouTube page. Follow us, the Scudbuster Diaries, at edsharkphotoimages.com/Scudbuster Diaries. We do Facebook Live broadcasts when there's severe weather in our area. You can also find us on YouTube. You can also watch us on Flagler County Television, Spectrum Channel 492. One last plug that I want to give is to Flagler County Assist React. If you're at the point that you're ready to start giving back to your community, I recommend this organization. It is awesome, and it's a group of dedicated volunteers that support all aspects of emergency management within Flagler County. Take a look at them on Facebook and join. It's a great group. Thank you for watching. My name is Ed Sharkovich. I wish you have a safe day.